friends, this is Sacred Scriptures with Sarah. I'm Sarah Wilder, your host. This is a vlog series by Superior Disciple, and today we're going to be talking about Peter. This is our second episode in a series on Peter, the first pope and one of our greatest saints. Last time we talked about a chain of events, a chain reaction that led up to the encounter between Peter and Jesus. And today we're going to talk about the second encounter between Peter and Jesus, which occurs in the Gospel of Luke. And I'm excited to talk about Peter because I think often people's appreciation of him is superficial at best. A lot of times I hear people say things like, gosh, I just love Peter because he's such a screw up. Or, man, he's relatable because he's such a sinner, or he's so prideful and rash like I am. And I think sometimes we can use this to justify our actions or our behavior or our sin. And this image that people paint of Peter really, it makes me cringe. I mean, how would you feel if you were one of the church's greatest heroes, one of the church's greatest saints, and all people could say about you was that you were a prideful screw-up? I just don't know if it does his character justice. And so I want to take a closer look. I want to discover for myself, who is Peter? Instead of just re-echoing what I hear other people say about him, I want to discover who is he. And the way I'm doing that is I'm going straight to the source, to the scripture, and I'm praying with them and asking, like, what's going on in this story, and why is Peter acting this way? What is he like? Who is Peter? And so, yeah, I'm excited to explore that with all of you. So, before we dive into this passage from Luke, I want to give a little bit of flash content of like what has happened in the gospel so far. So this is the 4th chapter of the gospel, so it's still at the beginning. And Jesus has been born. He's been baptized by John the Baptist. He went out into the desert to hear the voice of God in the silence, and he was tempted by the devil there. And when he came out of that desert, he began his mission. And so he went from synagogue to synagogue, preaching and proclaiming and teaching in the synagogues. And he actually got quite a following. Like, a lot of people were a little bit ruffled by his message. A lot of people were really listening to what he has to say. In one particular time that he was in the synagogue, he was teaching on the Sabbath, and he actually encountered a evil spirit that was inside of a man. He cast it out, and that drew a lot of attention to him. That was like the first big thing, besides him just teaching and preaching, that kind of drew people's attention. And so this is kind of where we're at. He hasn't performed any miracles yet in the Gospel of Luke. He hasn't done anything super miraculous. He's just been teaching and preaching. But he's gained a following. He has a lot of people listening to what he has to say. And then in the Gospel of John, last time we talked about how John saw Jesus and pointed him out to Andrew, and then Andrew went and followed him, and then Andrew introduced Peter to Jesus, and that's where they met the first time. But until this point, Peter is just one of those people who hears him teaching in the synagogue. And he knows who he is, he's heard of him, and then this is where we're going to pick up. Jesus rose and left the synagogue and entered Simon's house. Now Simon's mother-in-law was ill with a high fever, and they besought him for her. And he stood over her and rebuked the fever, and it left her. And immediately she rose and served them. Wow. So our first interaction with Peter in the Gospel of Luke, imagine this, is not a prideful moment, a boastful or rash moment. It's not even a moment where he screws up at all. It's an act of utter faith. He had met Jesus, he had heard his teachings, and he believed that Jesus was the Messiah. He believed that Jesus was the Messiah, and he invited Jesus into his own home to bring his healing power. He was the first person in the gospel stories to request Jesus' healing power, and he did it in his very own home. That's incredible. And this act of faith, this invitation, inviting Jesus into his home, and asking for his healing, opened a floodgate of healings. So we listen to the next verse right after that. It says, when the sun was setting, all those who had any that were sick with various diseases brought them to him, and he laid his hands on every one of them and healed them. And every one of them was healed. Wow. Dozens of people came into Simon Peter's home and were healed before his very own eyes. The first miracle triggered a series of miracles, all in just one moment. As the sun was setting, just healing after healing occurred. Wow, that's awesome. How about us? Do we, when we see Jesus, when we hear his message spoken, do we believe that he's the Messiah? Do we invite him into our homes? Do we request his healing power in our own lives? Wow. If you maybe have met Jesus, maybe you have encountered him, I want to challenge you to invite him deeper, to request his healing power in your own life, and see what happens. Because if he's really, if we give him total permission, total access, we're going to see miracles. We're going to see powerful stuff. I've seen miracles. I've seen dozens and dozens of healings and miracles because I've invited Jesus into my life, and I've requested his healing power, and I've seen it. So that's my challenge to you. This is Sacred Scriptures with Sarah, examining the second encounter between Jesus and Peter. Tune in next time to hear about the third encounter between Jesus and Peter, which happens in the following chapter of Luke. Thanks for watching. I want to see your face. I want to know your heart. I want to walk with you every day of my life, God. Every day of my life.